He was just a lone scientist exploring the coastline, until a roar from above stopped him cold. What he found was unthinkable. A full-grown lion clinging to a cliff's edge, seconds from falling to its death. But what happened next? No one could have predicted. A rescue that defied nature, and a goodbye that left the world speechless. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Now, let's jump into the story. The wind swept gently over the Namibian coast that morning, sending soft waves crashing against the shore. Jared Winter stood ankle-deep in tide pools, collecting water samples for his ocean research project. He'd always liked quiet places, like this, where the land met the sea and time seemed to slow down. He had no idea his life was about to change forever. Just as he packed up his equipment and turned to head back to his small beach camp, a strange, piercing sound echoed through the air. It wasn't the cry of a bird or the growl of a jackal. It was deeper, raw, desperate. He froze. It came again, louder, sharper, filled with fear. Jared's heart jumped. Whatever that was, it wasn't normal. His instincts as a scientist and human being kicked in. Grabbing his backpack, he began to move toward the sound, carefully stepping over sharp rocks and uneven sand. After 20 minutes of climbing, he reached a rise where the cliffs curved sharply above the ocean. That's when he saw it. A lion. Not just any lion, but a massive male, golden mane tangled with salt and sand. He was hanging off the side of the cliff, his front paws clutching a narrow ledge that was crumbling beneath his weight. His back legs kicked out, trying to find ground that wasn't there. The jagged rocks below promised a deadly fall. Jared couldn't believe it. A lion? Here? On this coastal cliff? The animal let out another roar, this one weaker, laced with exhaustion. Easy, easy, Jared whispered, even though he knew the lion couldn't understand him. Or could he? He scanned the area. There was no way the lion had come up here for fun. Most likely, it had chased something, maybe a bird, or seal, or another animal, and gotten trapped when the cliff beneath him gave way. The stone looked worn and weathered, ready to break at any moment. The lion's amber eyes locked onto Jared's. There was fear there, but something else too. A kind of silent plea. Jared grabbed his phone and dialed the local wildlife emergency line. After a long wait, a calm voice answered. "I'm near Cape Hollow," Jared explained quickly. "There's a lion stuck on a cliff. He's going to fall. He needs help, fast." "I'm sorry, sir," the voice replied. "Our team is on assignment at Etosha over 4 hours away. If the animal is in immediate danger, we won't reach him in time." Jared looked back at the lion. Its paws were slipping slightly, claws, digging into nothing but dust and old stone. "He doesn't have 4 hours," Jared said, more to himself than to the voice on the line. "He has maybe 20 minutes. He ended the call and stared at the lion. Then he looked down at his pack. He had a belt, a jacket, some rope used for tide measuring, and his own 2 hands. That wasn't much. It definitely wasn't a rescue kit, but it was all he had, and that lion was going to die if he did nothing. Swallowing his fear, Jared moved closer along a safer section of the cliff until he was directly above the lion. Every step made his legs shake, not from weakness, but from the weight of what he was about to attempt. "Okay, buddy," he murmured. "I'm going to help you, but we need to work together. You hear me?" The lion didn't growl, didn't snarl, didn't even move. Instead, it let out a sound unlike anything Jared had ever heard before. A deep, low rumble, mixed with what sounded like a tired sigh. It wasn't threatening. It was pleading. Heart-pounding. Jared took off his jacket and began tying it to his belt and rope to make a longer makeshift strap. It wouldn't lift a full-grown lion, but maybe it could give him just enough support to shift his weight and climb. He fastened one end of the rope system to a nearby outcropping and lowered the other end down toward the lion. "I'm going to try to loop this under your chest," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Please, stay still." Jared leaned over the edge carefully, his fingers working to swing the strap down and around the lion's body. The lion moved slightly, adjusting, himself as if trying to help. What was happening didn't feel real. This wasn't a zoo animal trained by humans. This was a wild predator, working with him. The wind picked up. Bits of gravel slid from the edge. Jared adjusted his position, trying not to look at the deadly drop below. His fingers brushed the lion's thick fur. He managed to hook the makeshift strap around the lion's chest and began pulling gently, slowly, testing how much support he could give. The lion didn't fight, didn't panic. Instead, he stared straight into Jared's eyes, and for a moment time froze. Two creatures so different, so far apart in every way, were bound together by one fragile thing: trust. And as the rocks shifted again under the lion's weight, Jared knew there was no turning back. The rescue had truly begun. The wind howled louder now, sweeping across the cliff and rattling the loose stones beneath Jared's feet. His fingers ached from gripping the rough edge as he held the makeshift strap in place. Below him, the lion dangled, breathing hard, his massive chest rising and falling as foam gathered at the corners of his mouth. His strength was fading fast. "Come on, big guy," Jared whispered. "You have to help me help you." The strap, made from his belt, jacket, and a coil of rope he used for coastal surveys, was rough and clumsy, but it was all he had. It wasn't strong enough to pull the lion up entirely, but it might give the animal just enough support to shift his weight and climb. The lion, somehow understanding the situation, didn't thrash. He remained almost still, swaying slightly, as the wind tugged at his mane. His eyes never left Jared. Jared adjusted his footing and tightened the rope where it was anchored to a rock above. Then inch by inch he leaned further down, guiding the strap around the lion's thick chest. His heart beat so hard he could feel it in his throat. The lion let out a deep sound. Not a growl, but something lower, softer. It wasn't anger. It was cooperation. "That's it," Jared murmured. "Good. Just a little more." He looped the strap under the lion's front legs and tugged gently. The lion shifted, claws scraping at the cliff face, trying to find something, anything to stand on. At that moment, the rock beneath the lion cracked. A small piece broke off and tumbled into the waves below. "Hold on," Jared shouted, tightening the rope with both hands. The lion let out a pained sound, more air than voice, but he didn't panic. He pulled inward, gathering what strength he had left, and started using his powerful back legs to search for footholds in the crumbling cliff. The next few moments felt like hours. The lion clawed at the rock while Jared pulled the strap upward, using every ounce of strength he had to take pressure off the animal's failing grip. They moved together, slowly, carefully. It was as if they were dancing on the edge of disaster, step by painful step. Below them, the ocean slammed against the rocks, sending white spray into the air. After several grueling minutes, the lion managed to shift his weight and get his back paws onto a small ledge. It wasn't much, but it was enough to stop him from slipping again. Jared exhaled sharply, sweat pouring down his face. "We're not done yet," he said out loud, more to himself than anyone else. He reached into his pack, pulling out a second rope, the last one. Tying it to the original strap, he extended the length, allowing the lion more movement. Then, step by step, they continued the climb. Each time the lion moved, Jared adjusted the rope, talking to him constantly. "You're doing great. Just a bit more easy, big guy." The lion, against every natural instinct, followed his lead. He didn't rush. He didn't fight. He moved with purpose, with care, as if he knew his life depended on this strange man holding a rope above him. Another ledge. A pause. Breathing. The two locked eyes again. "Almost there," Jared said, nodding. "You've got this." The final part of the climb was the most dangerous. It required them both to reach a wide ledge big enough to stand on safely. Jared carefully climbed ahead and tested the space. It was solid, large enough for them both. He turned back, bracing himself, and gently tugged on the strap. The lion stepped up, one paw then another, until finally, He stood beside Jared on the wide ledge, trembling, soaked in sweat, his sides heaving. Jared dropped the rope and stumbled back in disbelief. "You made it," he whispered, voice cracked from exhaustion. "We made." Then the lion looked at him and did something Jared would never forget. He stepped forward, not aggressively, and pressed his forehead lightly against Jared's shoulder. It was brief, barely a second, but it was real. Then the lion lay down, body stretched out on the stone, too exhausted to move another muscle. Jared didn't speak. He simply sat beside him, heart pounding, watching the waves crash below. They were still 40 feet above the beach. Still not safe, but they were alive. Both of them. A voice crackled from Jared's radio. It was Nora Ellefson, his colleague at a nearby weather station. "Jared, what's going on? I got your message." He pressed the button. "Nora, bring rope. Bring everything. I've got a lion on a cliff with me. And he's not just alive, he's calm, cooperative. It's unbelievable." There was a pause. "Did you just say you're sitting on a cliff with a lion?" "Yeah," Jared replied, glancing at his new companion. "And I think we just climbed into something no one's ever seen before." The lion closed his eyes, chest rising and falling slowly, as if for the first time in hours he felt safe. And beside him, Jared sat in silence, staring out at the sea, wondering what would come next. Because this wasn't just a rescue anymore. This was the beginning of something rare, something wild, something that could never be explained in science alone. The sun dipped low on the horizon as the sky turned golden, then pink, and finally, a deep dark blue. Jared and the lion, who he now silently referred to as Sanu, sat side by side on the wide cliff ledge. Neither of them moved much. They didn't need to. The hard part was over. For now. Sanu's side still rose and fell in steady, tired breaths. His eyes opened now and then, scanning the sky or glancing at Jared. He was calm. More calm than any wild animal should have been after such a terrifying experience. Jared, too, was exhausted. His hands were scraped raw, his muscles sore, and his brain still couldn't quite accept what had just happened. He had worked alongside a lion, with him, as if they were partners, not predator and prey. It didn't make any sense. And yet, here they were. The sound of voices broke the stillness. Jared sat up straighter. Down on the beach below, flashlight, beams flickered through the growing dark. Nora had arrived with rescue gear and 2 members of the local wildlife unit. They waved up at him. "We see you," Nora shouted. "Hang tight, we're coming." Jared nodded, then looked at Sanu. The lion didn't flinch at the noise. He simply blinked and stayed put, tail flicking slowly behind him. When the rescue team finally reached the ledge, they approached with caution. One of the wildlife officers carried a tranquilizer rifle just in case. But Sanu didn't show his teeth. He didn't growl. He remained seated, breathing slowly as if the people didn't worry him at all. "That's not normal," one of the officers said quietly. "He should be pacing, nervous, even aggressive." "He's tired," Jared replied, "and maybe he trusts us. I don't know why, but he does." The officer looked skeptical but nodded. With ropes, harnesses, and strong hands, the team guided both Jared and Sanu safely down to the beach. It took hours. The lion followed gently, step by step, without needing to be forced. At one point, as Jared led the way down a narrow path, he heard soft footsteps behind him and realized Sanu was only inches away, choosing to walk in his shadow. By the time they reached the sand, it was well past midnight. The sky sparkled with stars. Jared collapsed onto the cool beach. Sanu lay down just a few feet away, his tongue lolling from his mouth, clearly dehydrated, but no longer in danger. The veterinary team moved in quickly. Dr. Leona Vale, a quiet, serious woman with a kind voice, examined Sanu from a careful distance. She looked puzzled. "He's letting me near him," she whispered to Jared. "And that's extremely rare." "He's been calm this whole time," Jared said, wiping sweat from his face. I think he knows we saved his life. Leona injected the lion with a mild sedative and fluids to help him recover. She checked his paws, minor cuts but nothing serious. His body was strong, his spirit was tired. Then something strange happened. The team prepared a large cage for transport. Sanu lifted his head and looked directly at Jared. When Jared took a few steps away to give the team space, Sanu stood, wobbly but determined, and followed. He doesn't want you to leave, Leona said, watching the lion intently. No, Jared agreed softly. He doesn't. When they tried moving the cage closer, Sanu backed away. Only when Jared approached and spoke gently to him did the lion settle again. Can you ride with us? Leona asked. To the wildlife center? If you're not there, he might panic. Jared didn't even hesitate. Of course. The ride to the rehabilitation center was silent. Jared sat beside the transport crate, visible through a small window. Sanu watched him the whole time. If Jared looked away, Sanu would make a low rumble, a soft, breathy sound like a purr, but deeper, almost like a hum. At the center, Sanu was given a large enclosure with shelter, food, and water. It was safe, clean, and far from any cliffs, but he still refused to eat unless Jared was nearby. Each time Jared walked to the edge of the enclosure, Sanu would press himself against the fence, tail flicking slowly, eyes watching every movement. He's bonded to you, Leona said. I've never seen anything like this. He acts like you're part of his pride. Jared didn't know how to respond to that. It didn't make sense, but it felt true. That night, instead of returning to his cabin, Jared rolled out a sleeping bag just a few feet from the fence. The sky was clear. The stars were bright. The world was quiet. Around midnight, Jared heard a sound. A deep, soft rumble coming from the enclosure. He sat up and saw Sanu lying near the fence, eyes half closed, his giant paw resting against the wire as if reaching. For him. You're talking to me again? Jared whispered. The lion rumbled once more in response. Not loud, not scary, just there. And so, they lay together, man and lion, separated only by a chain-link fence and joined by something much stronger. Trust. In the stillness of the night, under a blanket of stars, the bond between them grew deeper, and neither of them would ever be the same again. The days passed slowly at the wildlife center. Sanu recovered well. His wounds healed. His strength returned. But something hadn't healed. His attachment. He still refused food unless Jared was nearby. He waited by the fence for hours, his golden eyes searching for the one human he trusted. Even the veterinarians began to notice. The lion didn't just like Jared. He needed him. Dr. Leona Vale, watching from her office window, shook her head more than once. He doesn't act like a rescued wild animal. He acts like he found a friend. Jared visited every day. He sat near the fence and talked to Sanu in a soft voice. Sometimes he read from his journal. Other times they simply sat in silence, listening to the birds and the distant wind across the grass. He's not just surviving, Jared said one evening. He's remembering. That idea made everyone pause. Was Sanu capable of memory, connection, even emotion? They didn't have long to find out. The plan had always been to release Sanu back into the wild. He belonged there, not in a cage, no matter how large or comfortable it was. But releasing him while he was still so bonded to Jared could be dangerous. He might not return to natural lion behavior. He might try to find Jared instead of living among his kind. So Jared came up with an idea. Let's take him back to the place where it happened, the beach, he said. Maybe it will remind him what he survived. Maybe it'll help him let go. Dr. Vale agreed. It's worth a try. The next morning, just after sunrise, a transport truck rolled out toward the coast. Jared sat beside the cage. Sanu stayed calm the whole way, his eyes always on Jared. When they reached the familiar cliffs of the Namibian shoreline, something changed. Sanu stood. He paced with excitement. His ears perked up. When the cage door opened, he didn't charge out or run wild. He walked out slowly, sniffed the air, and turned toward the beach. Jared followed from a short distance. The team stayed back, giving them space. Sanu moved with purpose, straight to the very spot where he and Jared had collapsed together after the rescue. Then he began to dig. The sand flew under his massive paws. For several minutes he worked silently, like an animal with a memory with a mission. And then he stopped. He leaned down and carefully pulled something from the sand, something torn and faded. A piece of fabric. It was part of Jared's shirt, a scrap left behind during the emergency weeks earlier. Sanu carried it gently in his mouth, walked to Jared, and dropped it at his feet. The beach was silent. No one spoke. Jared knelt and picked up the fabric. "You remembered," he whispered. His voice trembled. The lion sat back on his haunches and looked up at him, not with hunger or fear, but with what could only be described as calm, as understanding. "He's giving me back a part of myself," Jared said. "He's saying goodbye, Doctor." Vale, documenting the scene from afar, wrote in her notebook, displaying signs of memory recognition, symbolic behavior, never before recorded in wild lions. But Sanu wasn't finished. He walked to the edge of the water and turned to Jared. When Jared approached, Sanu did something no one could explain. He gently nudged Jared's hand with his nose and sat beside him, facing the ocean. They watched the waves together. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the sand. The orange light danced on the water as if the earth itself wanted to say farewell. After a few minutes, Jared stood. "It's time." He turned to walk back to the others, heart heavy but hopeful. Sanu watched him go. Then, slowly, he stood and began walking the opposite direction, toward the inland cliffs, toward the wild. Every few steps he stopped and looked back, not because he was confused, but because he was saying goodbye. One final look, one final pause. Then, from about 200 yards away, he stopped and let out a single deep roar. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, it was long, clear, full of something unspoken, gratitude, connection. "Farewell." Dr. Vale's hand shook as she wrote. "This call is unlike any we've recorded. It's not territorial, it's personal, a message, a memory." Jared didn't respond with words. He just raised his hand and let it fall back to his side. 3 months later, Jared returned to the same area for fieldwork. As he set up equipment on a grassy ridge, he noticed movement in the distance. A lion. Not close. Not threatening. Just watching. They locked eyes across the savannah, and the lion sat down, just like he had on the beach. That was enough. That one moment, quiet, powerful and full of meaning, was more than a reunion. It was proof that trust once given freely never really leaves, and that sometimes the deepest bonds don't need words at all, just a look, a place, and a goodbye that speaks.